Hello, everyone. In this episode, I have back my old friend and batchmate, TCA Srinivasa Raghavan. He's an economics journalist and tends to have opinions about various things. So he's going to express his opinions today about one of the most important long run changes being proposed, which is to have what they call as one nation, one election, which means everybody goes to elections at the same time instead of what has evolved in India, where the Lok Sabha elections are now synchronized with the Vidhan Sabha elections. So let's listen to him. Over to you, TCA.
Well, thanks, Subodh. Happy New Year, first of all.
Yeah.
It's just around the corner, and hope it turns out well for you. Getting to the topic at hand, this business of one nation, one election, it's being made out as if it's some kind of a conspiracy by the BJP. The point is that everyone seems to have forgotten, which is not surprising considering how long ago it was, that until 1967, we did have simultaneous elections to the Lok Sabha and the states. So that was the 52 election, that was the 57 election, that was the 62 election, and that was the 67 election. So 4 general elections were held simultaneously. Now, what happened then? What happened was that there was a power struggle within the Congress party, which you, of course, remember, with Indira Gandhi as the prime minister and the older elements in the Congress party trying to first control her and then evict her. And they didn't expect her to fight back in the manner in which she did. Essentially, what she did was she went completely populist in her economic policies, and she split the Congress party. So that happened in 1969. So when she split the Congress party, she was dependent on the communists for survival. She ran a minority government for 2 years. Then in 1971, she decided that she was now strong enough to hold a general election in which she could hope to get a majority. And she did. So the Lok Sabha election was held 1 year before it was due. It was actually due in 72. Had it been held in 72, it would have been business as usual. All the state assemblies would have gone to vote, and so would the Lok Sabha. That upset the, whatever it is you want to call it, the synchronization of the two Lok Sabha and assembly elections. So we ended up with a system where the Lok Sabha would be held 1 year before the next set of assembly elections. Okay. Not such a bad thing overall. It's okay, chalega. But then came the gross misuse by every government that succeeded Indira Gandhi in the 71 government, the 77 Janata government, the 1980 Indira Gandhi government, the 1984 Rajiv Gandhi government. There came this misuse of Article 356, isn't it? That one about dismissing state governments. It was a peculiar situation where if the central government received a report from the governor who it had appointed that there was a constitutional breakdown in that state, it was empowered to dismiss that government. And this was used merrily some 35, 40 times. So every state practically went out of sync with the general election. Then in 79, the Janata government itself became a minority government of sorts supported by the Congress from July onwards. And in 1980, it fell. In December 79, it fell. And there were general elections. So here was a Lok Sabha which had been dissolved in about less than 3 years. Earlier, because Indira Gandhi had declared the emergency, the life of that Lok Sabha, which was elected in 71, which should have gone in 76, that was extended by 1 year. So as you can see, both the Lok Sabha and the assemblies were getting out of sync. And there was no way of predicting what would happen, especially in the case of state governments. Even in the case of the central government, 1981, 1980, Indira January 1980, she came to power, and then she got assassinated. And Rajiv Gandhi became the prime minister, and then he set about dismissing a set of state governments. Now, this had become such a bloody nuisance of central governments dismissing state governments and elections getting out of sync, that in 1992, I forget who, S.R. Bommey case, it's called, Supreme Court, that was the case, in which the Supreme Court said that you can't do this. Any government, state government, it has to prove its majority on the floor of the House. It cannot just be dismissed because the Prime Minister wants it dismissed. And that sort of put a halt, administrative halt, you might say, but not a constitutional halt, to this business of having the power to dismiss an elected state government. Since then, it's hardly been used, which is a good thing. But what that has done is that it has only stopped the practice of state governments being dismissed. It has not helped in the business of getting the elections, Assembly and Lok Sabha elections, back together. Now, that's the background. Why should they be held together? Because when we started off in 47, then 56 states reorganization, we had 16 states. Now we have 29. Most are sort of mid-sized states. A few are very small, but a few are very large. The problem is that there are some states which the political structure there is such that the central government, whichever party which forms the central government, has a very strong presence in those states. Now, like it's the whole Hindi belt, for example, both the BJP and the Congress have a very strong presence. The Congress presence is declining, but it's there. In the South, neither the Congress, Andhra now, Telangana now, and Karnataka, the Congress has made some kind of revival. The BJP doesn't exist. In the West, once again, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, etc., particularly Maharashtra, which sends 48 MPs, I think, it's a very large state as far as importance in parliament and the survival strength, etc., of the central government, the party that forms the central government, their strength is concerned. UP, 80. There's Bihar with, it's 40 now, I think.
It's 40.
West Bengal, which is 42. Now, these states don't have, they also have a competing regional party. The UP has the Samajwadi Party. Rajasthan doesn't. It's still a two-party state. Madhya Pradesh is still a two-party state. But Maharashtra has 4 parties. Now, it's inbuilt in the states which have more than 2 parties, and in some cases, like in Karnataka, where they have only 2 also, though there is a sort of rump of a third, the Janata Dal, the probability of a government falling before its 5 years are over is low. But in the states which have more than two parties, the probability increases proportionately to the number of parties and number of seats that they have. What that means is that both, it's regardless of which party is in power at the center, they always have to keep an eye cocked on that particular state. All states, actually, which means that all your administrative decisions, policy decisions, all of these, they're constantly being influenced by the need to win an election. Now, I'll just give you one extraordinary statistic. In the last 3 years, we had 7 elections in 1 year, in 22, 9 in 23, and we have in 24, we had the general election, then we had the Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, etc. So what I'm saying is that every year there is either a bunch of small elections or not such a big bunch, but a small bunch of very large elections. No government, none, regardless of whether it is from this party or that party, whether it is ruling at the center, ruling at the state level, can take its eye off the ball. So what has been the consequence in the last 30 years? Central main consequence has been a secular increase, the constant increase in the number of freebies that are being announced by different parties. It doesn't matter who it is. They all get into this game, and you have this a very large draft on the budget, which means that there's so much less left for other stuff, and all the consequences of these freebies. Those who like to justify these things, etc., they'll say, as a percentage of GDP, it's not much, this, that, and the other. Maybe it's not, but maybe it is. We don't know where the hidden thing is. Subsidies are, or at least not always. That's one problem. The other problem is, very, very interestingly, liberalization of the 1991 and a greater role for the private sector, blah, 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 all of that, for a time, it reduced the strength of the trade unions. But ever since we've got into this, ever since the number of states has increased, basically, the unions have become more strong. And it doesn't matter whether they are affiliated to the Congress or to the BJP or to the communists. Their bargaining power has increased because they can deliver, they can make the difference at a constituency level. Right. So this is another thing that the central, whichever party is running the center, that has to keep in mind. Right. The other problem is government servants and their pensions and their salaries. These also have to be kept in mind, because these chaps can make a difference. There are some small states with a very high level of government employment historically, they can make or break a government. Or you can have a situation where, like in Tamil Nadu in 2003 or 4, whenever it was, the incumbent AIA-DMK government lost the election because the government servants, government employees, all pretty much en bloc voted against it, because the Chief Minister, Jayalalitha, had got very tough with them and said, look, all that she was saying was, we are paying you a salary, you should come and do work. And they said, what work? I mean, please, salary is not meant for doing our jobs. So basically, that was the argument. It was couched in, of course, very glorious terms. So the same thing had happened in Himachal Pradesh 10 years earlier, when the Shanta Prasad government in 95 or 96 fell, because he became very, very tough with the government employees. They voted him out. Chandrababu Naidu in 2004 in Andhra Pradesh all he said to the government servants was, please clock in and clock out when you enter, so that I know that you're in the building and you're not goofing off running a second, third business. He lost the election. So the government employees are a very powerful voter constituency across the country. Now, which means that every government, if you're going to have elections constantly, every government has to be very mindful of what are the goodies that you give to these chaps. And their salaries are constantly being increased. Their pensions now are fully indexed, which means they don't feel the pressure of inflation at all. Even though their actual numbers are quite small, their political influence is very high. So they get themselves these large and small benefits. What I'm trying to say is that if you are in a situation when you're constantly having elections, it exerts a very powerful and baneful influence on the budgetary exercise of both the center and the states. That's one part of it. Or it's a sort of, there are so many elements to it. Take the issue of attention, of governance attention, the Prime Minister's attention, the Chief Minister's attention. A situation where the Prime Minister is constantly campaigning. Now, Modi government, Narendra Modi himself, being the kind of leader that he is, very active, very hands-on, he might have campaigned a bit more than people did in the past. But they all campaigned. And there's always, their attention is not focused on governance issues. It's always divided between governance and politics. And guess what takes a hit? It's governance. There is also the atmosphere in the country is always edgy. You don't have a settled feeling. You say, okay, now we've had this election and 2024, we've had this election and jolly good, we can settle down to at least 3.5 years of settled government. No. 2025 is going to be the only year in which there's only one assembly election, which is in Bihar. Immediately after that, you're going to get 8, 9, 10. In the following year, also 8, 9, 10. So it's never ending. The political edginess in the country just doesn't stop. Now, because you are constantly having to fight elections, there's a huge increase in corruption. You can make a one-time hit if there are simultaneous elections, and you can because it costs X to X amount of rupees to fight an election, and it all has to be funded more or less clandestinely, privately, etc. But if you're having constant elections, you can multiply the level of money required by a factor of 5 or 10 or whatever. So the impact of having this kind of system where the country is always in an election mode, it has consequences, administrative consequences, governance, policy, economic, political, and the mood of the country. Now, when the ruling party loses some assembly election, the opposition goes all out attacking it. And when the ruling party wins, it goes all out attacking the opposition. Oh, look, we've done this. So that's also a very, very, silly, stupid way of running a country. Now, all kinds of questions are raised about, so what will happen if if you have simultaneous elections, and if suppose an assembly or the central government, if it loses the majority halfway through its 5-year term. Now, it's happened before. So you have another election. For this Lok Sabha, that won't be a problem because it's a single thing. The problem arises with state governments. If out of 29 states, say 10 run into this problem of losing the government, the party losing its majority, then what do you do in that interim period? Now, this is a very tricky issue because various suggestions have been forwarded. I myself, some 20 years ago, I was a great sort of campaigner for this sort of thing in my writing. And I had said that you fix a term and you change the term. Don't make it 5 years for the central government. Make it 6 years. And even for the state governments, you reduce it. You reduce it to 4 years so that the gap between the thingy, the time that you're elected for and the time that you lose the majority is minimized. And then find a way of dealing with that interim period of 1.5 years. Then people said, oh, but what will happen if it falls within 6 months? It's a very good question. I don't know the answer. And it has happened where governments have fallen within 6 months. But if a government falls, does it necessarily mean that you have to have another election? Can't somebody else form the government? And that has also happened. In a variety of states, in a large number of states, it has happened that somebody else has formed the government. Short point is that what happens if a government loses its majority before its 5 years, it's not an insurmountable problem. It is a difficult one because unlike before 67, or even before 67, the entire country, all the states were run by one party. So it didn't matter so much. But now there are different parties, there are different interest groups, there are different political formations, and obviously you have to hear all of them. So it's not going to be an easy one to crack. This disjunction, this asynchronicity between Lok Sabha and Assembly elections. But if you want governance to improve and its economic, political, administrative consequences of constant elections to be minimized, I don't see any way out of having a completely new system. Like I said, you let the central government have 6 years and let the state governments have 4 years. In any case, even with a 5-year term, they're ruling only for 4 years. In the last year, the guys are. So what will happen is that period will become 3 years of governance, etc. Blah, blah, all of that. But no other federation that I have been able to see faces this problem, and we have to ask ourselves why. I haven't looked at it very carefully, but technically the USA, the USA is a federation, Canada is a federation, there are various countries. I mean, even take a thing like Switzerland, which is, got all these cantons. How do they manage? And how does it influence the behavior of the central government? That's the central issue. I think I'll just stop there because really, I think there are far too many reasons for having one nation, one election kind of thing. There's one last thing, and there's one of the big objections is how will the election commission manage to provide bandobast, police and all that? Well, you have it. Right now, our elections are spread over 3 months. They'll be spread over 3 months even then. What's the problem? These are all, frivolous kind of things, and these can be managed with careful, inputs. So I'll stop there. If you want to need some clarification.
No, I think, thank you so much. It's first of all, only a person of your age could have made such an analysis because younger people don't remember the past. Okay. So I'm glad that there's some merit to being old.
Indeed, there is.
There is some merit to being old that you remember, not you haven't read in a book, but you actually remember 1967 or 1969.
We were in college our first year then.
So there's some merit finally to being old. Is that
Yeah.
you weigh it equally? You are not just influenced by what's happening in the last 10 years. You go back and you think what used to happen because you don't have to think it. It's inside you,
Inside you. Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
good. So that and it is my my usual practice not to comment on issues here. It's like an op-ed. The op-ed's person is just on video. It's not an interview. I'm not going to ask serious questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I want to raise one issue, which is like this, that for the sake of discussion, let's agree with everything that you have said. Okay. There's no challenge to anything for the sake of discussion, or even if it may happen that I agree with you, it doesn't matter. The
Yeah, sure.
question is this: is it enough to have a constitutional amendment? Because, in my opinion, India has too many constitutional amendments. Okay, we need to stop having constitutional amendments to deal with each other on issues that are not really at the level of constitution. Now, that's a principle. What I'm asking is this a serious enough issue that it merits a constitutional amendment? Having said that constitutional amendments are too many in India, we need to stop using the constitutional amendments as a way to influence what you might call the hurly-burly of Indian life. There's a hurly-burly of Indian life, and you've outlined it very clearly. Elections, and this fellow does that, and that woman does this, and there's money is wasted here. Okay, fine. I agree. We're not discussing that. I would like to discuss what merits a constitutional amendment. And is this high enough, serious enough? And as it is, they lost because the constitutional amendment requires more than a majority, simple majority in Lok Sabha. So right now, the chances of a constitutional amendment, I won't say, but they lost, right? So how do you see it as a constitutional amendment?
See, it's simply this, that at the moment the constitution says that any elected government will last for 5 years.
Right.
And elections, and there is that whole thing that at the end of 5 years, you have to call the newly elected government within some X number of days, etc., 180 days, 180, I think 6 months, something like that. All of that, all that is there. What I would say a constitutional amendment doing is simply a 2 or 3 line article which says simply this, that all elections, state and central, will be held simultaneously. It doesn't have to be some long, article 1B, 1C, 1D, nothing. Just that. I'm not a legal expert, and the legal experts will always come up with some provided this, provided that, subject to this, subject to that. All that will come. But just a simple statement of requirement mandating that the whole country will have elections at the same time. This should have been mandated in 1950. It wasn't, because nobody envisaged this situation, especially of the misuse of Article 356.
Well, but that has ended. As you said, the
No,
Supreme Court
so
ended.
therefore it's made it easier now to have this amendment. But you're right, politically they don't have the numbers to get this through. It would require, I assume, a 2/3
Yes.
thing of the states also. So
No, it doesn't. It apparently it's one that doesn't require the state's approval.
So this parliament doesn't have the numbers for the ruling party, but
Right.
they would certainly be able to push it through, because they have the numbers, in the sense that the coalition has the numbers. They could push it through if they
Even the
want to.
coalition doesn't have the numbers.
Why? They have 300 and something
But it doesn't
between them.
become the necessary.
I see. Well, there you are. 2/3 नहीं होता है. Correct, quite right.
Certainly.
हाँ. 2/3. That's right. So it's not going to happen in this parliament. So, but it's a thing that needs to be done. See, yeah, there are 1 billion voters. It's best to get them focusing only for that period of the election rather than constantly discussing politics. And if you watch Indian media, Indian websites, goodness, there is nothing but politics all the time.
Hmm.
So it tires you out.
Okay, that's great. So let's end this discussion here.
Yep.
I will post it and I will ask people with opposing point of views or not opposing. And because opposing, this is not a thing of which you can,
Yeah.
not opposing because you have given a very thoughtful analysis, just alternative views. And we will have several perhaps, but we will not have a panel discussion. Okay.
Excellent.
I just hate panel discussions because nobody gets a chance to speak. Okay? Everybody is being interrupted all the time, It is silly. It's a completely silly. I mean, it was set up at a time when there were some rules of discussion and this and that. Today, all that has gone the way. So,
in India now, sometimes it happens that the anchor simply switches off the mics of everybody except the guy.
Even the bloody
you
debates.
See, a guy is talking.
Even the presidential debates in the US, they switch off the mic. This guy is going to be president or this woman is going to be president. You're threatening to cut off a mic. I'm saying, what the hell have you brought these two together for? If they can't even talk in their allocated time without interrupting each other, then it's time we stopped this pretense that panel discussions generate anything except noise. So I am not competing on that basis. So I'm not having a point of view. I'm saying it's a platform. We'll see if others want to give. But in the meantime, let's end it here today. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'll be back with young person or an expert. Till then, bye everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.